And I guess the most interesting thing for me, the moment where I thought, my God, I can't believe how big this has got. I came out of a restaurant in a Russian city and I heard my music being played on the streets.
Wow.
Fountains, you know, there's fountains in the sort of the square. And I was nearly in tears. I could not believe it. I felt like Elton John or Robbie Williams.
Hey, what is good, YouTube? Thank you guys for tuning in. My name's Gov and welcome to another episode of the Property Newbie Podcast. On this week's show, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Gwyn Thomas of Bespoke Sourcing to talk all things property, all things deal sourcing, as well as talk about football, Russia and music. And if none of that makes sense to you right now, you're going to be in for one hell of a surprise. As always, if you like the video, please be sure to hit that like button. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on those bell notifications for more videos like this. But without further ado, let's just jump straight into the video. Enjoy the show. All right, so we're live in 3, 2, 1. Mr. Gwyn, welcome to the show, my bro.
Govmeister.
I'm so excited. Legit. I haven't seen you for so long because of this world pandemic that's going on, obviously. Well, and I couldn't wait to be within 2 meters of you, to be honest.
Well, it's the first time I've been to Birmingham and it's been sunny, so that's a good
Have you actually checked your car that it's still got tyres because you are in Birmingham, innit?
To be honest, they probably do need a change. So it's a good thing.
Nah, so thank you for coming down, man. Like I said, I've waited ages. You're one of the first people that I wanted sort of like on the show, man. So thank you for coming down. But with you, obviously for anyone that don't know, we've known each other for over about a year now, haven't we?
Yeah,
and the one thing that unites us both is our love for property.
True.
So obviously you got your own property business. We'll start talking about that to get that started with, and then we'll just go into a little bit about yourself, man. So as I always ask with everyone, property is one of those things that when you do get started, a lot of people follow the traditional route of I've got to get a buy to let, I've got to save up a deposit. But obviously you've gone down a slightly different path, which is one of the strategies that a lot of people are starting to learn about now, which is deal sourcing. Right. So tell me, how did that start about? Like, what made you want to get into property and then more specifically start off with doing a bit of sort of like deal sourcing and then build an amazing business around it?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I fell into property a long time ago. I can't even remember which year it was, but I bought my first property in Cyprus. Not even in the UK. And I bought it as a kind of a holiday, like investment type of property. And the logic was really stupid. My mum and dad had built a house around the corner, and I just wanted to have an apartment literally around the corner from them so I can go on holiday with them. So no real kind of thinking about long term whether it was going to be an investment. I just thought it was a good idea to buy a property somewhere abroad and potentially maybe rent it out to a short-term basis. And funny enough, it was kind of like a serviced accommodation apartment.
No way.
But I didn't really understand it at that time, so I never really thought about moving to Cyprus, and was renting it out on a short-term basis. So that was the first property I kind of got involved in, and that was probably back in 2003, 2004. So it was a long time ago. And then obviously the second part to it was building a house in Russia. So I built my own house from scratch. Worked in construction or development company and decided to buy a piece of land and develop it. So that was the second part. And then obviously moving to the UK, coming back, repatriating back to the UK after living abroad for such a long time. Yeah. I got involved into rent service accommodation and then setting up my own business with deal sourcing.
You know how you just said like you were in Russia, you built your own house. We'll get onto that. But so obviously you're born in the UK, you decided to move to Russia for a couple of years and then decided to sort of like move back. But when you went to Russia, what was the motive behind that? Because that's a huge move.
To be honest, I never saw myself as 100% British in terms of my mentality. I was a bit more of a kind of a globalist or somebody that sort of didn't think about people's... I wanted to be around people that had a similar opinion to me, and I didn't feel that the environment I was in, that I felt there were lots of people I could bounce ideas off. Everybody was quite conservative, very closed, not thinking about entrepreneurship or anything like that. And I didn't want to get into this rat race of 9 to 5, working in the city, and I thought I could scale my career a lot quicker by going abroad and being unique in a different environment than being another number in the city, wearing the same suit, putting the same perfume on and all the rest of it. So I actually didn't stay in Russia for 2 or 3 years. I stayed there for 15 years. Wow. But the plan was always a 6-month period. It was never like, a kind of an assignment, I guess, or I don't know, sort of a small period. But it turned out that I went for 6 months, then it was 12 months, then it was 2 years, and the rest of it, kind of marriage, kids. And it was only really, I don't know why I stayed out there for so long, but the reason for coming back was property and setting up my own business. But the reason for going to Russia was to be unique and create a different lifestyle and different career path for myself than the average person would do coming from Essex, London.
Yeah. But did you have a plan beforehand? Because to just up and leave, that would be very brave. But did you have a plan of what sort of job you were going to do out there? And why Russia specifically? Because you could have chose any country in the world. Because obviously, like I said, you just wanted to sort of escape here and be unique in another country, which you definitely would have been. But why sort of Russia out of any other country that you could have gone to?
Well, I had a gift for languages, so I studied French and Russian. And as a kind of sign of respect to my parents, I just wanted to use that going forward. Yeah. So they paid for my education. They paid for me to get drunk at university and get a good degree, etc. And I thought, well, look, I've got to use this degree somehow. And I thought about going and using French, but the French language became less and less appealing, and I was more and more interested in Russia as a country, as a nation, in terms of mentality. And I thought it had so much to improve on. And as somebody who had a mentality of always to build and to sort of grow and develop, I thought it'd be a great place to go. And I spoke fluent Russian. I couldn't really read and write massively well. Obviously, I'd got a degree in French and Russian, but you never can be perfect in a language until you live there.
100%.
So I thought, well, it was a way to go over there and I guess perfect my language skills, and as a side, or not as a side thing, but to build a career in another country where I was literally unique. And I was, because how many British people do you know that speak fluent Russian and have lived there? And it doesn't exist really. So it was a nice opportunity.
Did you know what you wanted to do out there specifically? What sort of career that you wanted to lead out there? Was there a sector or a subsector? Was there an area that you were interested in? Or was it just a case of, I've got to make the move. I know the language, which is probably the biggest obstacle. And then it was just a case of, I'll figure out the rest and see what opportunities are there when I'm there.
Well, everybody talks about mindset and getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I guess that I don't think I've thought about it at the time, but thinking back now is like, I need to get out of my comfort zone and sort of put myself in that situation. And I guess I did instinctively.
Yeah.
And the actual industry I was going to go into was working for the Russo-British Chamber of Commerce. So it's kind of quasi-government linked. And I thought to myself, it's very prestigious. It's a lovely badge to put in your CV.
Yeah.
And then from there, I could build the sort of my career. So, if you're working for a Big Four company, or if you're working for a law firm or an accounting firm, it's always about the brand you're working for.
100%.
And when you say, "Oh, you're working for the Russo-British Chamber of Commerce," it sounds really, really posh. So it was more of a case of not the actual tasks that you're doing, because when you're young, you're not as fussy. You're kind of happy to learn the ropes. Yeah. Get some experience and then figure out what you want to do next. And that was the same with me.
You said something there that was quite interesting a little bit earlier, that when you did go to Russia, you worked with or for a developer, and then you built a house from scratch. Yeah,
so the last 2 years of working in Russia, I was working for a largest Eastern European developer. And it was almost like a bit of a plan, a kind of a legacy plan, but also to dovetail with my transition to the UK.
Yeah.
So I wanted to work out on the very highest, sophisticated, most detailed level of how it's done, and then use it for my small projects in the UK. So if I'm doing a land and development project in Essex, I would know all of the process from start to finish and see how on the most sophisticated level it's done, and how architects are planning things, how you get planning permissions done. Okay, albeit in a different country, but the actual process itself
is all calculated.
Yeah.
I love that. How was it? So you obviously had the sort of like plan to come back to the UK, but initially it started off as 6 months in Russia, and then all of a sudden 15 years later you decide, okay, now's the time I need to go back. What was that point that you thought, right, okay, I want to go back to the UK now? And did you want to continue your property business specifically in the UK, or was it a case of, okay, I've got a bit of a background in this, I'm back in the UK, I want to do something with it?
Yeah.
What was the sort of transition from 15 years in Russia straight back to sort of the UK?
I guess I'd break it into 3 parts. The first part was thinking, that I was always in roles which were about 2 or 3 years long in terms of longevity. And it was a point where I knew that I'd work myself out of a job because I do a very good job and then become an expensive resource within the company. So I was brought in to centralize, optimize all of those processes. And then after 2 years, they say, do you know what? You're expensive, you know, we don't need you anymore. And I thought, can I keep doing that until my pension? Is that really kind of how I see everything? Where you're investing so much time in other people and then they don't give you back that kind of reward that you think you deserve. That's the first part. The second part was that I was becoming less and less unique in that market. A lot of Russians were starting to be trained and educated and kind of starting to become... The only difference really I had was my honor, respect, you know, prestige and those things, which to be honest, there are still good Russian experts out there. So I was becoming more and more expensive and I thought, well, I need to make myself again unique. So that was the second part. And the third thing was that I'd made a kind of a pact with myself that the Russian World Cup was the final straw, the kind of the final piece in the jigsaw, which would round off my history or, I don't know, segment of my chapter of my life before moving back.
I want to actually get onto that because you brought it up, so it ties in nicely. A lot of people, so obviously I know you from property. I've from Facebook and sort of like seeing your stuff, Bespoke Sourcing. We'll go on to that a little bit later. But one of the things that stood out for me is obviously once we started talking a couple of months down the line, you sent me a link to a YouTube clip, and I was like, I opened it up and I was like, what is this? And it's you in the official sort of like Russia World Cup, singing the song, doing the anthem, the album. And then you sent me another one where you're on stage. So you'd had this sort of like music career, which I knew nothing about. How did that feel? And how did that come about? Because like I said, for anyone that's met you, you're so calm, collected that you'd forget that you have this, or they wouldn't know that you have this sort of like music career and ability and a love for it.
I guess it's weird talking about one topic about property and then moving to this, because it seems a bit strange probably for people who are listening to it. But I've had 3 main passions in my life. One is football, one is music, and one is, I guess, property, and actually, 4, Russia as well. And I guess that when I was growing up, I was really good at football. Nearly got a contract for Norwich City. Wow. As soon as I left Norwich City, I took up the guitar, started weeping and creating, ballads for myself, and started to sort of get more and more into music. And it got more and more serious. And then when I went to Russia, created a band, sort of making music, and I met a governor kind of for one of the regions in Russia, who saw us perform at one of those FIFA fan festival kind of like events. Yeah. So when the Brazil World Cup was going on, they saw us performing there, and there was a big screen, and we were performing, with some other superstars, like Russian superstars and stuff like that, and legends from the 70s that you wouldn't remember. But we were asked to make a song for the World Cup, and I just said, yeah, of course I'll make a song for the World Cup. That's crazy. And they were saying, how much is it going to cost? And I'm thinking, I'll do it for free. It's like, for me, this is going to be massive. It's a massive honor. So we wrote a song on the train home after the concert. We recorded it, and then they said, can you make a video clip for it? They started promoting it. And I guess the most interesting thing for me, the moment where I thought, my God, I can't believe how big this has got. I came out of a restaurant in a Russian city, and I heard my music being played on the streets. Wow. Fountains. There's fountains in the sort of the square. And I was nearly in tears. I could not believe it. I felt like Elton John or Robbie Williams. And of course it was never that huge. It was just a nice period and a nice chapter and a box to tick. Yeah. But we had the opportunity to perform at the opening ceremony. In one of the regions, we created a song for one of the host cities. And that song, literally the whole city knows. If it's played on the radio, they'd be able to say who it was. And it's a little small bit of fame in kind of the big picture of stuff. But for me, it was a massive honor because it combined football, music, and Russia, everything together. Yeah,
we won't talk about football because you're an Arsenal fan, aren't you? So we won't go there. Anyway, I'm United, so it's not any better. Anyway, it's crazy though, because you put yourself out of your comfort zone again regarding sort of like your music and sort of, it was a passion of yours, but a lot of the times you find a lot of people tend to sort of kill their passion or keep it sort of behind doors, but then obviously you performing, someone saw it, and then look what it sort of led to. I remember you writing a little LinkedIn post on this, which actually went viral, just about sort of following your dreams and following your passion. Just to bring it back to sort of property, So you came back to the UK. First of all, actually, before we go back to the UK, what was the Russian culture like in comparison to the UK? That was probably like the most notable difference between the two in terms of how people are, what they like, their mentality. Was there much, or?
Yeah, every culture is massively different. For me, I'm more Russian, I guess, probably than British in certain aspects of me. So I'm very kind of open, honest and direct with certain things. And people will say, well, hang on a minute, Russians aren't very open, honest and direct. But actually, once you get to know Russian people, they've got a very hard sort of shell, but in the middle, they're very soft and caring and loving people. So whereas in the UK, if you hadn't called a friend for a year or a month, they'd be saying, why the hell haven't you called me? Yeah. Whereas the Russians would be so glad that you've called. Yeah. So there was lots of different cultural differences. Obviously, the diet and the food there is completely different in terms of the behaviour and how they do business. Obviously, it's a lot more intense. They postpone things until the last minute, and then everybody rushes and does things quickly, and a lot more, open corruption. Corruption in the UK exists, but it's a bit more kind of hidden and sort of under tables, right? Whereas there, it's kind of part and parcel of business. So that was different. Style of management. So I was managing people and having to micromanage people, pushing them to do things, which whereas in the UK, you'd probably just tell one of your colleagues to do something, and you'd expect them to get it done. So lots of different cultural differences in that aspect.
So when you did come back, what was one of the first things that you did in terms of your business side? Did you start your sourcing business straight away, or did you get back to doing other jobs and then move back into property? What was the sort of transition like when you came back?
So initially I wanted to do everything on my own. I didn't plan to sort of have a partnership with anyone. I had a pot of cash that I wanted to do to put into property. But then obviously the more you think about things, you think, well, I can't really do everything on my own. You need to partner with other people. You need to share resources. You need to, you need other investment. So I essentially did some training. I also invested in some service accommodation units, and I went quite big into it. So I invested in 12 apartments. Wow. Which usually kind of, it's probably the Grant Cardone 10X thing in my head. Yeah. Let's go big, let's go all in. Yeah. And it was a bit of a kamikaze kind of risk to take, which partially paid off, partially kind of was a little bit silly probably. And I probably would have invested that differently. But it kind of was a massive learning curve as well, because I learnt the ropes very, very quickly in terms of how some serviced accommodation worked, how the kind of the model was, and what the good, bad and the ugly of the whole process was. And I managed the apartments partially actually from Russia. So I was doing viewings of properties traveling from Russia, booking like 5 viewings, getting on a flight, going to view 5 properties, making offers, and then flying back to Russia, trying to convince people that I was local. So I had to be a bit creative there. It was really difficult for living in Russia, for example, and coming back, because I was nobody for anyone. Yeah. I was nobody in terms of, even though I was British and I've got a passport and everything else, and I was born here, from a financial perspective, even though I had money in the bank, I didn't have a salary. You can't get mortgages. Yeah. So it was limiting in terms of what things I could do. And you needed to build, 1-2 years of credibility 100%. To be able to become someone. And that was a thing which I kind of realised that I was at a disadvantage maybe to start with. But now, obviously, met my business partner, Hannah Mills, and we started obviously Bespoke and created a deal sourcing business, which has provided the foundation for our investment opportunities and things that we're doing.
One thing I love, which actually sort of like rings true with a lot of people. So obviously you're big sort of motivator and sort of a backing of our Property Newbie community, which is just anyone that's new to property wanting to jump in. But they're in some respects in a similar position to you, in the sense that you came over, you didn't really know anyone in the industry. You probably lost a lot of your contacts as well, being out of the country for 15 years. So you were starting fresh. How do you go from that to sort of starting to build your network, your business? I mean, what sort of steps did you take? Because you literally came in with like nothing, and we'll talk about Bespoke a little shortly, because that's just an amazing story. Yeah. But how do you go about? So like people like myself, like 12 months ago, I didn't know anyone in the industry. How do you start from that and start making steps to sort of getting your name out there and building a good network and of support and friends around you and even business partners?
So working for the Russo British Chamber of Commerce, I was pretty much an introducer, a massive networker. So I was introducing businesses to one another, and I always knew people's names, took their business cards, I'd introduce them to each other, and kind of was, I hadn't done it for a long time, but I was a very good networker at the time. Coming back to the UK, I thought I would buy into a network. So basically join a training academy or kind of a community whereby there was already 1,000 or 2,000 people in that community, which you can then, they're people that have same vision, the same sort of dreams, the same pretty much objectives. So this financial freedom, you know, kind of time freedom stuff. And I thought that would be an easier way to do it rather than kind of holding a sign up and saying, here I am, I'm back, you know, kind of. And I think the second part to it is that you just have to be honest and truthful and sort of yourself. And a lot of people kind of have this mask. They go to networking events or they go to, you know, property training, you know, sort of academies or whatever, and they try and put on this mask and try and be people they're not. And I think the thing for me was that I'm guessing I'm at an age where I don't really want to be anybody else apart from myself. Yeah. And for a lot of the time, when you're working in the corporate world, you're trying to position yourself as this honourable, you know, kind of person, and deep down you're, you know, a little bit different maybe in real life. But for me, it was more of a case of going to these events, saying it how it is. Yeah. If you don't like something, say it. Yeah. If you do like something, praise the person. And people kind of thought, oh, actually, this guy seems like he's quite genuine and quite honest. And I don't understand why it's such a big deal for people.
Yeah, see, I was talking to the Fontaine Bros. So for anyone that hasn't watched it, it's the video before this one. First ever ones to kick off the podcast. And one thing that I noticed about them, which I brought up, is the fact that they literally just do not care what other people think in the sense that they don't feel like they have to put on a front. They're always themselves. If you watch any of their YouTube videos, it's just so humbling because they'll be there in their hoodies and their tracksuit bottoms, and it doesn't mean that they're not smashing it. Yeah. It's just a case of they will just never change, and they will always be them, and they'll always be honest. And I do feel like sometimes in, I guess it's sort of just all aspects of life, you kind of almost feel like you have to prove yourself to people. But I think the world that we're living in now is shifting towards just being honest and just being genuine, which obviously is sort of like worked for yourself, especially building the sort of network that you got now. Well,
for me, it's second nature, and it's kind of, I don't understand why when people are brought up, you're brought up to be truthful, honest, you know, sort of diligent and the rest of it. And for whatever reason, people have this impression that you, by doing things which are not according to those principles, you'll get to somewhere quicker. Yeah. But I think me and you share the same value in terms of that long term, that's never going to work. Yeah. And I see a lot. I was thinking actually in the shower this morning before I came down to Birmingham. I do a lot of my thinking in the shower. I bet you do. And I thought to myself, it really frustrates me that people use their bad experience as an excuse to be able to try and con or cheat people with something else. So I'll give you an example. A lot of people have gone through training programs and lost money, and they think it's then okay to say, I will try and do the same to another person in order to recuperate the money I've lost.
It's immoral, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think to myself, well, just use that as a learning curve, put it to bed, you know, kind of pat yourself on the back and say, you know, get on with it sort of thing. And I think that's the thing which a lot of people fail to do. They kind of think it's easier to take a shortcut somewhere. And the same in the deal sourcing world. So I see a lot of people trying to sell deals where they've done no due diligence. They've done no real kind of informational checks on things, and they're just passing brochures across. And I think to myself, look, if you're going to be doing things, do it in an honest, diligent, and kind of professional way. Yeah. Same as you'd want to expect from a doctor. Yeah. You wouldn't want to go to a doctor and say, you know, he just goes on the internet and types in, you know, whatever disease and say, yeah, hang on a second, you should be doing this. You'd expect somebody to be a bit more kind of detailed with everything they do, but also honest and professional. Yeah.
How have you found sort of deal sourcing? So you've set up Bespoke Sourcing.
Yep.
which obviously you're selling deals left, right, and centre. Obviously you got Hannah as part of that as well. You two just make an amazing power couple, man. Like it's literally just both of you are just both on par with each other. How have you found sort of deal sourcing, and when you started out, is there any advice that you'd give to new people that are just starting, sort of wanting to get into deal sourcing, seeing that as a way to sort of get into property, maybe just make a bit of money with the right deals and the right process? Is there any advice that you'd give to them? Or
so we started out actually off the back of a bad deal sourcer who we'd come across, and we thought about, what do we do? Do we go to Facebook and sort of put this guy, hang our sort of dirty laundry out in public? Do we take him to court? Do we do this? And in the end, we just said, you know what? Why don't we start a business? Why don't we, don't we turn this negative into a positive? And some people will say, well, you should have gone to court with the person. And to be honest, I think to myself, well, we probably make more money by setting up the business and doing it properly than we would have done by doing the different route. And so we sat down and said, well, nobody seems to be doing this deal sourcing sort of business in a proper, ethical and legal and compliant way. Everybody says they are, but somewhere down the line, 2 or 3 months, we're hearing stories that, this guy didn't refund money, this person hasn't done this, if somebody a deal which didn't stack up, or it's not legally compliant. And I just thought to myself, is it really that difficult to sort of follow a simple recipe of being consistent, honest and diligent? And so we decided to set up the business, and obviously because of our experience with rent service accommodation, that was the sort of first strategy which we focused on more, and we grew obviously sort of from that space. In terms of what advice I'd give to newbies in terms of doing it, is there's no shortcut in terms of all of this stuff. If you're ever going to get into any new profession, whether you're going to be a singer, whether you're going to be a footballer, whether you're going to be a deal sourcer, there's going to be that 6 to 12 months hard work of getting up every day, focusing your mind, sitting down, going through the steps, and keep on repeating them until you get the results. So you wouldn't expect to go to the gym, pick up 100 kilos and start, bench pressing or whatever. You'd go start small, you start practicing, build it up until you get to the next level. And the same with us. We weren't selling loads of deals in the first 2 or 3 months. That didn't happen. We were fighting to get our salary, every month. That was the honest truth. So in the first 2 or 3 months, we were selling 2 deals a month, maybe. So one Hannah was selling, one I was selling. And you think, between 2 people, that's not a lot. It seems like not a lot of deals, but people are told that they can make loads and loads of money, which is, it can be possible, but it's not possible every single month. So I'd say that you need to make sure that your expectations are very, very clear from the start, and make sure that you're in it for the long term, because if you want to sort of dip your toe in, it's never going to work. You really have to commit to it. And next week, hopefully we're going to be training around about 14, 15 people and giving them some flavour of how it really looks like from the inside. Because I think people are a little bit, the wall's been pulled over their eyes. People think that it's, simple and easy. And there's a lot of intricate parts to it which don't get seen or heard about on the Facebook groups or on YouTube. And it's only the people that are sitting there day and night. So one thing actually I want to mention is about time. And people don't really think about the time and effort that goes into it. So for example, on the way here, I'm still dealing with questions with investors. I'm still talking to agencies over the phone, still talking to Hannah and our team, talking about deals. And it's a Saturday. You can work until 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, still assessing, looking on Rightmove and the rest of it. And part of that is probably my bad, because I shouldn't be, I should limit the time of when I'm doing it. But I'm so passionate about getting to the stages that we need to get to quicker, that if I put the hard work in now, I know it's going to pay off in 6 to 12 months anyway. So that's the thing that people need to realise, that it is a serious profession, that if you do it properly, you can get the rewards and you can get the traction, but there's no shortcut.
I want to delve deeper into that actually, and I'll probably ask a couple of questions from sort of the newbie perspective. One thing I will say about your work ethic is, I know this for a fact because I know when I'm messaging you at 2 a.m, you're still up playing FIFA at 2 a.m, because that's the only time that you get. And then you're back up.
That's not work
It is, mate. When you're doing like 6 till like 10 of work, and then it's like, okay, now I need to watch some UFC and some FIFA. Then I know that, like, okay, this guy's got his priorities sorted. So it's not all work. But a couple of things that I want to ask from sort of a newbie perspective. So one of them that you've just started to answer regarding if you were just starting out, what sort of steps that you need to take, and you do need to know every single step as well as you can. There can't be those shortcuts, because at the end of the day, there's two things that are on the line: your reputation, and you've got a consumer that's paying you thousands of pounds. Do you know what I mean? So you have to get it right. A couple of things that I would like to ask, and I'll be asking this on behalf of obviously our Facebook group. In terms of getting deals, that's perfectly fine. The difficulty that I had when I was starting out was actually finding investors to purchase these deals, because agents are not going to hang around for you to say, well, okay, I've got a deal now, and let me go and find the investors, and it takes me 2 months to find someone to buy it. They just have no patience, and understandably so. What advice would you give to a newbie in terms of building up an investors list of people that are fairly confident that will buy? And number two, would you build up the investors list as you go along, or before or after you start?
So I think the first thing is what people will ask, what comes first, the investor or the deal?
Yeah, it's like chicken and egg, isn't it?
And to a certain extent, there is no right or wrong answer. But on the other hand, you always should have the client before you get the product. So in my opinion, it would be easier to find the investor who is committed and serious before looking for the deal. So you can go sit for hours and hours on Rightmove looking for properties. But if you don't know who that property's for, if he hasn't told you it's 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, it's in a city centre location, it's this rent, there's no point, because you don't know who you're going to give that to. So you could be wasting agencies and landlords' time.
Yeah, true.
So it's better to form a relationship with an investor and ask them what they're looking for, and going through dummy deals with them and saying, look, I've got this property in Oxford, this is what it looks like, this is what it's going to be making, and then getting their confidence that they will go forward with a deal. Then go and look for properties, because obviously when you're already in the business, it doesn't really matter, because you'll always have a balancing act of I've got too many investors and not enough stock, or I've got too many properties and I don't have enough investors. But also, I think that newbies should think about partnering with people who they think are credible and that they think they can follow in their footsteps, or maybe even help one another, because every deal sourcing company needs more of something, whether it's they don't have enough buy, refurbish, refinance, or they don't have enough serviced accommodation units, or maybe they don't focus on different areas. So if somebody came to me tomorrow and says, I work in Liverpool, I can go and find investors in Liverpool for service accommodation. If you guys want to find the properties, that could be interesting maybe. Same as in Birmingham or in Manchester. So depending on the areas, that could be a way of a newbie having an alliance with somebody else, leveraging off their kind of knowledge and their background, following kind of their recipe and seeing how it works. So that could be another way of doing it. Obviously, there's mentorships and training, but you need to do proper due diligence and make sure that person's interested in the end result, because a lot of the time people are left hanging. They'll go through a training session. They say, "Here's the carrot," here's another kind of course. Pay for more, and so for us, the training, we're not really into doing training. I don't think we ever wanted to kind of make a business out of it. We're going to help a few people as well, but we're more interested in long-term partnerships. We want to make sure that we're getting into a business bed with people that are credible, honourable, and have our interests at heart just as much as we will have their interests at heart.
I love that. Is there any sort of specifics in terms of how you would go about finding investors? A lot of my investors tend to primarily come from social media. Right. Things like, obviously I'm sort of lucky enough to have the Facebook group. Things like LinkedIn have worked particularly well for me. Have you got any sort of like particulars, or do you just find over time, the more you start, more your reputation gets better, the more you're selling, the more you get sort of customer reviews and people sort of promoting you, that these investors will come naturally? Or how would you get sort of started in sort of a specific way?
I think it depends on the strategy you're looking at, but I think in general, the more that you showcase what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, it will show your personality and what type of person you are, and it will attract those type of people to you. Yeah. So if you're demonstrating that you're looking for properties in Southampton, for flips, and you're constantly doing that, and somebody asked a question in a different group saying, oh, do you know somebody who's deal sourcing in Southampton for flips? They will remember that they've seen you, and then they can recommend you. So it's one of those things where the more content you put out there and the more you transparently show yourself as a person, people will either be attracted or not attracted to you. So there are some people you watch and you think, oh God, I don't like watching that guy. He doesn't really fit my kind of personality, which is fine. But there are some people who will say, oh, I really like that guy. You know, he seems to be pretty honest, and he's getting more and more people, you know, watching his videos. So I think content is probably one of the things I'd say. And basically walking the walk. People want to see that you're doing it, not just talking about it.
100%.
So if I'm a deal sourcer, shall I show them a camera of me looking for properties and how I'm doing it, demonstrating, you know, sort of how I go through the spreadsheets, me talking to a management company about, you know, will this work for serviced accommodation? So people need to sort of see deeper in terms of how you're doing things, because they want to see behind the facade and the mask that you have, is there any substance?
Yeah. Do you actually have the knowledge to back it up?
Yeah.
I love that. One thing that I would go back to, if you don't mind talking about, but I do feel it might be able to help people, is you touched on it just briefly regarding, obviously you got stung by a dodgy sort of deal sourcer. Is there anything for some newbies that are sort of cash rich that just think, you know what, I don't have the time and I don't necessarily want to learn the process inside out. I just want to get my money, which I have, and I just want to buy a deal off a deal sourcer. Yeah. Is there any sort of due diligence that they could do beforehand on the sourcer, as well as little bits that they should know about how to analyze and assess a deal, and just to make sure that's right?
Let's break it up. So in terms of a deal sourcer, first and foremost, you'd probably want to look into social media and see what they're like as a person, what sort of how they're communicating with people, if there have been any bad publicity, looking a bit further into that and seeing whether or not it's been kind of confirmed in some form of way. You want to go maybe onto company's house to see if there's anything suspicious there. Maybe it doesn't matter if somebody set up a company 3 months ago or 6 months ago. The main thing is that if they've got any other related companies which have had bad issues, you may want to ask them to see about what do they focus on, because everybody will focus on different things. So if somebody asks me about Newcastle buy-to-let properties, you know, I can't help really with that. That's not what we focus on. So everybody will have a kind of a specialization. So you should find out what their sweet spot is. Probably I'd ask them to demonstrate some sort of credibility somehow, some previous projects they've done, some happy investors, and having a chat with them. And probably a couple of other things, but essentially getting a flavour of, from a legal, organisational, financial perspective, whether or not this person is somebody I could work with.
To kind of separate, if you like, the people that are just sort of putting a front on and don't actually have what you would classify as a proper business, versus those that are actually treating it as a job, have the people that they can sort of like fall back on to sort of talk to and trust and say, well, I actually have brought a deal from this person, and have that sort of confidence to move forward. Yeah,
and to be honest, it's not hard to do that due diligence. You can just put out there, you know, has anybody met this guy before? Has anybody had any bad dealings? And you'll see people tagging each other going, you know, do you want to tell your story? Go on. And the thing is, like you said before, it's really hard to build a reputation, but you can smash it to pieces in seconds. And for me, I worked in Russia for 15 years, and I could have quite easily have been bribed, taken loads of different money from people and stuff. And for me, it was all about principles. If I do that once, or if I do that twice, my reputation's ruined. I'm nobody here anymore. I'm not unique. And that's one of the USPs, which I think we have at Bespoke, is that will never be broken because of who we are. And the people we bring into the business, we make bloody sure that they have exactly those same principles, because otherwise it's going to be ruined.
Yeah. What about in terms of the basics that a newbie should know if they were going to purchase a deal, from the numbers and analytical side? Because you can trust the deal sourcer up to a certain point, but there's still certain parts that you would still need to know, maybe how to use a rent-to-rent calculator at least, or understand maybe like bills. Is there any sort of like key fundamentals that you'd say, at least learn this, or at least know this, as well as doing your due diligence before you take a deal on? Or would you just put it into the hands of sort of a deal sourcer?
Obviously, you shouldn't put the hands of everything into, you know, companies or deal sources, but you need to have a balanced opinion. So if you've got friends that have done deals before, and the deal sourcer shows you something, you'd show it to them and say, does this look right?
Yeah.
You would speak to management companies. So if they're introducing you to management companies who are going to be looking after it for you, if you're not managing it yourself, you'd ask them, does this look like a deal? Would you be happy to manage it? And don't just speak to one person, speak to 2, 3, 4 people and get a flavour of whether or not that really does stack up. Because if you don't know the numbers, or if you don't understand the business model, it is a risk, because I don't know Bitcoin, for example.
Yeah.
If I gave you some money and you were a Bitcoin expert, I have to trust you 100%.
Yeah.
So you need to understand sort of some key fundamentals of the different strategies of what should work and what shouldn't. So take, for example, serviced accommodation. There's a general rule of thumb that 50% occupancy is the break-even point. You should be managed. And if it doesn't really fit that, or it's not close to that, then you shouldn't really take it on.
Yeah.
That's the general rule of thumb. So if the spreadsheets show that it's 50% plus, then it's something you should think about considering. Then you can go into the details of, is the rent high? Does the management cost look silly?
Absolutely.
Or the bills sort of inflated? Or, have you done all of the legal due diligence on the compliance side? So it's difficult, obviously, on a podcast probably to drill down without seeing a spreadsheet in front of you, but because I'm an Excel kind of holic. But I'd say, I definitely would, if you don't understand it, then just ask somebody that does, and somebody that's not linked to the deal. Yeah. And then you'll get a kind of a more independent view of, is this right or not?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. I mean, to be honest with you, when you're first starting out, you probably don't have an idea of how to work out the rents in a certain area, the nightly rates, how to work out the bills and linen and everything that comes with an SA or a HMO. But if you build enough of a circle around you that you can share that deal with someone to sort of get a second opinion, if you like, then that definitely is a plus point.
Just one more point I just wanted to make was that look at 4 or 5 deals, because the more deals you start looking at, the more clear it will become what the numbers should be. Yeah. Because when you look at one individual deal, it could look great, but then you look at 5 other deals and they may not look as good. So you need to look at kind of a few deals before you get a feeling of that. Sorry for interrupting you, by the way.
Nah, dude, it's a podcast, man. We're here to talk, bro. By the way, if anyone is getting into Bitcoin and crypto, it is the future, man. So just throw that out.
I'll have to pick your brains and give you.
You can just give me the money, man. I'm an expert. It's fine. I wanted to bring it back to sort of Bespoke. So tell me a little bit about how Bespoke got started, a little bit about what your plans are and what you're currently doing. And then I want to move on to a question which my friend and my boy Neil has asked, which I know you already probably start talking about, but it's an amazing question. So just tell me a little bit about Bespoke and tell me a little bit about what you do.
So obviously Bespoke started probably about 1.5 years ago now. Yeah, I think it's about 1.5 years now. And essentially, my business partner and I, Hannah Mills, she was somebody that I was working went to a mentorship program with, and I'd liked her as a person. I thought that she was just kind of an energizer, somebody that really was just, you saw straight through her. She was so transparent.
It's like an excited bunny all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, she's like a dog, actually. I tell her that. But she was based in Wales, which has no link to my name or my which people always say, oh, do you live in Wales too? But she just came across as such a brilliant person, and somebody that I wanted to help, kind of like a sister. And business should be something where you kind of, like a family, you want to kind of grow things together. And I could see her passion and excitement and energy. And I thought, well, I'm a little bit older than her. I'm maybe not as energetic, but I can sort of see that we could balance each other out in that sense. And property is a lonely place, and I didn't want to do it on my own. I'm not very good at working on my own, and having lots of big teams working in the corporate world, I wanted to get myself together with someone and form a team and build a team and make it something which was not kind of just the Hannah and Gwyn show. So we set everything up on the basis of obviously the experience that we had, and we wanted to do things in a much more legal and compliant way. And we started out kind of like most people, working from home, working together and just focusing on serviced accommodation deals. Those are the things that we understood more and we wanted to work on. We thought we would just focus on that. But we we really struggled with this shiny penny syndrome.
Yeah.
People would call us up and say, I've got this great HMO, 6 beds, it's got all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's look at it. And we looked at everything. And after a while, I said to her, look, we are never going to get anywhere if we keep on being distracted by all these land deals, HMOs, below market value stuff. We need to just focus on one thing, keep it going for 6 to 12 months, and we'll reap the rewards, and we'll be able to get out of this kind of first phase of trying to take it to the next level. So that's what we did. And I'd say that it took us around about 6 months before we really started to get some traction. So with investors, we're getting repeat business, people that were taking more deals, you know, buying 6 deals in a block or something like that, which was really great.
Wow.
And it gave us a bit of a breathing space, because you're fighting and climbing up that mountain to get to the point where you can just take a break. And one thing I actually wrote a post on it the other day was about contingency, is that when you're working on your own, you can never be sick. You can never go on holiday. And you need to build a buffer. You need to build a kind of a pot of money so that you can give yourself time to take yourself to the next level. And you saying to me, look, you're working all these hours and not going to bed. And honestly, I said to Hannah, I said, we're going to work ourselves into a kind of an early grave here. We don't have any insurance for ourselves from a medical perspective. If, for example, you know, especially coronavirus, things like this, if one of us is sick, you know, that's a very kind of fragile business. And I never wanted to have a fragile business. I wanted to have the fundamentals of having like all the stakes in the ground, putting sort of the foundations there so that we wouldn't have to worry if she went away for 2 weeks to Australia, or if I had to take a week off. So that was the thing which was important for me, and that's how we've tried to grow it.
No, spot on. I was just thinking about from because you just sort of like touched on it there. Obviously the virus. I won't say the full word because I know YouTube will take this video down.
Right.
Has that affected your business in any way during this sort of 3 or 4 month period? Because I know a lot of estate agents have been closed. Obviously, viewings have been difficult to do. If it has affected your viewing, is there any other aspect of your business you've been working on instead, or how has it just impacted your Bespoke and yourself and Hannah in general?
Honestly, it's actually been a massive boost for us.
No way.
It's actually had a massive impact, and I really, obviously, the people that have suffered it, obviously, heart goes out to them. But from a business perspective, it's actually been great. And I'll tell you why, is that because everybody has stopped and we've carried on. So it's a bit like everybody's been distracted by what they've been seeing, what they've experienced at the moment. And we've tried to sort of keep the blinkers on and still carry on as if nothing has happened. So viewings weren't possible. Okay, we've got virtual tours. We've got video tours instead. Offers were being made, but offers were being made for a month's time. So we were bagging deals while people were still playing their Xboxes and watching Netflix. And we thought, if we can actually, while people are sleeping, keep on reaping the rewards and carrying on as business as usual, we'll get to the next level, which then will allow us to be able to scale. And obviously, a lot of people applied for bounce back loans and things like that, and we did the same as well. And for us, that was another kind of way in which we could have a buffer to give ourselves some breathing space and really think strategically of what's the next step for us. Because you can be a bit like a hamster in a wheel, keep running around. But we wanted to make sure that the next 2 or 3 decisions were key in terms of how we now get to the next level.
So you talked a little bit about breathing space, and I'm going to go on to a question from Neil, actually, because I've got it on my phone because the question was so long, I couldn't bother to write it down. Shout out to Neil, by the way. Amazing guy. So he's asking you, from starting your sourcing company to wanting to sort of scale up your business, which I'm sure you'll do. At what point was it that you started to think, right, okay, now is the point that I need to start maybe potentially scaling up, maybe potentially getting employees in? And as you mentioned, maybe giving you that breathing space. Was it just that realization when it impacted that, when you were sort of like working long hours, that you realize this? And he goes, in terms of your business model, was that always the plan to scale up when you started, or was it just a case of you saw yourself now at a point where you're doing pretty well, and now's the point to sort of take it to another level?
I think sometimes you have plans in your head and they change halfway through the middle of them. So I think Karen and I wanted to scale the business to a certain level, but not really kind of grow a massive team. We thought that we would have our own investments and that would be enough. But in terms of contingency, it became more clear when, for example, she said to me, oh, by the way, in March, I'm going away for 2 weeks to Australia to my brother's wedding. And I thought, right, okay, that's brilliant. I'm really happy for you, but who the hell's going to be doing your shift?
Yeah.
And it wasn't a case of being upset or, angry about it. It was more of a case of, from a practical perspective, of how do you deal with it? And it made me think about, okay, what are we because I worked in insurance, I worked in sort of, PwC, all these companies, and you're always talking about how business continuity, contingencies, buffers, 20% margin, sort of protection of your margins, all these things. And essentially, I thought to myself, well, if we don't have something in place by the time she goes abroad, things are going to lag again, and we're not going to have that consistency. So essentially I said, right, okay, this is the decision. We're going to have to bring our first person into the business. And obviously it's a big decision because you're going to have to pay for somebody else as well. You're going to have to bring their salary into the equation, and you think, well, we're doing okay, but do we have enough money to really keep paying for other people? But it's one of those things as an entrepreneur, if you don't believe in what you're doing and you think you can't train that person to keep things going forward and bringing in more business, then what is it? Is it a lifestyle business? What is it you're trying to do? Yeah. So you have to get out of your comfort zone again and say, do you know what? It's definitely gonna happen. And we brought in Karen. She was the first person we brought in. And to be honest, she had no property background whatsoever. She'd worked for Goldman Sachs in the city.
Wow.
She's a mother with 2 children, married, and her children go to the same school as my children. And I just thought, do you know what? It'd be great to have local-based people longer term. So they would, if we're going to be doing developments in Essex and South Wales, we would have local knowledge, local people, but providing a platform for women to maybe come into business that didn't really have an opportunity to go back into the city and earn good money, and give them a flexible schedule in terms of they could dip in and out of, into the company and work for us, for a certain amount of hours, and provide them with a platform to grow themselves as well. So it was kind of a not double-edged sword, but it kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone. We were finding that if we can help solve a local problem, a local issue solution, find a solution for local people, that would then help us with these issues of us going on holiday or being sick or whatever. So we brought Karen into the business, and in the first month, she brought in 7 deals.
Yeah,
which paid for basically for 3 or 4 months of her wages, and we thought to ourselves, do you know what? Why don't we bring in somebody else? Yeah. If we can do that, why not bring in somebody else? And so we thought about it long and hard, and obviously we're not bringing in tens of people every month, but the scaling element was really clear for us from the start, but we didn't really know how to and what point to. But it became kind of like we were shoved off the edge of the cliff when Hannah had to go on holiday. And it was one of those things where by that period, we needed somebody in the office who was learning how to do deal sourcing and can bring in the business as well. So that happened, and it was, I don't know if it was luck, if it was a fluke, or she's an amazing employee, and we love her to bits. And so it's something whereby we've given somebody a chance. They've really, really shown their true colours and done a great job. And it's given us a chance to think, well, actually, could we bring in somebody else? And it's made this second decision a lot easier. Yeah. So the first step is always the hardest, right? We've been massively impressed, and we've got now 7 people in our business. We've got people that are working with investors. We've got people working with agencies. We've got 2 new people starting on Monday that's going to be supporting some business development type activities we're looking at. People that are going to be supporting our admin function. Plus, we've got a social media kind of person that's always helping with that side of things, and somebody else as well. Oh yeah, and Hannah's partner Corey is also sort of helping us with finding properties.
I think what I like about that is you didn't bring someone in without already having been there and done it, because obviously with Karen, she'd not had that any sort of like property, maybe deal sourcing background or whatsoever. But because you and Hannah had been doing it for so long, it was easy for you then to be able to sit someone down and transfer those skills onto that person. And then the fact that she's smashed it only sort of reconfirmed what you already wanted to do, which was scale up your business, get employees. What would be sort of like the ideal sort of like future goal? Would it be an office full of like sort of like Wolf of Wall Street style, sort of like loads of people on the telephone? What would be sort of like the long-term goal in terms of like your scale?
We're going to have about 4 or 5 arms to the business. This is the longer term plan. We want to have a private equity fund or some sort of financial institution which finances all of our activities. So we're getting cash for a smaller percentage than we would do with the banks or with bridging companies, etc. That's the first objective. Second objective would be to obviously I want to make myself redundant by the end of the year and become more of a shareholder entrepreneur rather than an operational, cog in the process. Because as much as I think I'm good at certain things, probably my main thing is my creativity in terms of creating new businesses and ideas and optimizing and driving things forward. So my target is to become less and less involved in the day-to-day activities and bringing people up that can actually fulfill the kind of the company objectives. And then obviously there's some other interesting things. So we're working on some land and development opportunities, and that we want to actually develop them out, or even sell them on with planning game. So that's something we're focusing on in Essex and South Wales. We're also considering a kind of a franchise model with the deal sourcing. So a bit like Starbucks, but kind of from deal sourcing perspective.
Okay.
But it's hard to control. It's hard to control the quality of people, and it may just be a partnership relationship with people where we still control everything, but they are kind of linked to us. So putting people through our kind of, I say training program, but it's not going to be a machine where we're kind of charging people for it. It's more of a case of just giving them the instruments and tools where they can learn to do the things in the way that we want them to be done. So to look at things in the same way, having the same spreadsheets. And then obviously we've got our own kind of properties that we're invested in. So buy, refurbish, refinance. We've got one at the moment which is going to be completed in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we've got another 2 or 3 which are going to be going through. So there's our own investments together with Hannah. We've got some development opportunities which we're getting joint venture partners with. It's pretty busy.
I love that, because you started off chasing everything, then realizing we can't chase everything. We've just got to be specialists in one, sort of like your rent-to-rent SA. That was what you went down. And now you've got so much experience. You now feel confident moving on to your buy refurbs and everything like that. I love that. One thing I feel like I already know how you're going to answer this question, but it's a question from Dilnasheen. So big up Dilnasheen. She asks, what motivates you on sort of like a daily basis, a weekly basis? What makes you want to get out of bed? Especially when it comes to sort of this property, because it is very much an up and down game. You can go months struggling and then everything could come in all at once. But where does your drive come from?
It's a really good question, and it's not an easy answer. It's not a straightforward answer. There's probably about 4 or 5 facets to it. I guess as a child, I was doing paper rounds at the age of 7, so I was always quite a hard-working kind of kid. And my mum would take me to these really dodgy estates where I'd have to deliver papers, that nobody ever wanted, with Rottweilers and pit bulls. And that was the first part. And then I had a milk round. So I was always very hard working. So my motivation is not necessarily, it was always kind of been intrinsic in that sense. But I guess when you know that at the start of the month, you're kind of, the end of the month is not clear and you're having to fight for every day, you're kind of, it's like you've been thrown in the deep end and you have to swim. And that not knowing of what's next going to be happening the next day, that motivates you to sort of, because you keep growing. So every day will throw a spanner in the works and you're going to be keep on growing. Obviously family and children and things like that obviously are massive motivation things, and you want to build a legacy for them. But there's also a longer term legacy plan for me. So we're on this planet for a limited amount of time. We take a lot, but we don't leave usually a lot. And we're not always in a privileged position to be able to give back. But if I ever become in a position where I start to be able to give back, in what capacity that will be, I don't know. Whether it's setting up some sort of child charity fund where supporting children which are being.
I like that.
I can't say I'm a massive charity person because I'm not doing it on a daily basis. But I would like to help children that are in underprivileged sort of conditions. And when you've seen firsthand in Russia, in some of the cities and how they're living and how they're treated, it does open your eyes to think how lucky you are to be born in a country and in an area where you are not going to necessarily be what's the word?
Always subject to those
subject to those circumstances. I'm not saying it's just related to Russia, but even in the UK too. But those things are a little bit more important later in life, because the financial part is just to provide a platform to be able to do something bigger than just for yourself. Yeah. So that selflessness, longer term, is for me more of a powerful thing than just earning X amount of money per month.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's a rapper, Bugsy Malone, he says it, money is basically just freedom tokens. And the more money you have, the more sort of freedom and opportunities you do have to be able to do these things. The one thing that I would ask you is, obviously, I know you want to build your business up to a state where you can just step back now and you can just have a look at it from sort of a bird's eye point of view. Yeah. Do you feel like, because I've known you for a while now, and you almost feel like you need to be busy, sort of like on a daily basis doing something. What would you move your attention to? Would you want to focus on another business, or would it just solely be sort of charity stuff? Would you just, I don't know, would you start some project related to property? What would you want to do? Because I can't imagine you, because it for me personally, and it's at some point I'm sure I'll probably have to do it. When you start something from scratch, it's like your little baby, and then to sort of step back from that, hoping that it's going to run the same. It's always that bit of you that's a little bit nervous. But if you did, what would you want to do sort of on the side? Have you got any other sort of like future business plans or?
I go back to my main three passions, and football, music,
love it,
and Russia, and properties also. I guess I mentioned property as well. But in terms of football, I'd love to partially own a football club. or be the head coach of a football club. I mean, it's just something which, I mean, I tend to think I'm a tactical genius from the couch, but in terms of being in the inside of it. And I actually did have a project related to when I was working in Russia. I worked for a company, and we were doing some work with Rubin Kazan, the football team, and we're looking at the transfers and kind of how it all worked inside. And I'd love to be involved in football somehow, whether it's a small club that you bring up and go through the divisions, a bit like Gary Neville's done. That would be brilliant. That would be something I'd be interested in. And then maybe music producing, so writing songs for different artists, or even performing them myself. But to be honest, you do it to sort of give yourself more time to be able to enjoy life. And I feel that at the moment, obviously, there isn't enough time to give back to family stuff and family commitments, which is, one thing. So I don't really know how I would not keep myself busy, because I'm always busy. Yeah.
I know. It's like I said, your schedule pretty much is till like 2 a.m, and then you're up at 6, fresher than me. Like if I sleep that late, I'm like dying the next day.
Can I just mention something about that? Because people don't talk about this enough, and I think it's about your mental state and physical condition. And when you're working from home, I'm sitting at the desk here with you, right? You can be sitting at a desk for hours and hours and hours. And if you're working from home, you don't have to commute, you don't get on the train, you don't walk to the station. And a lot of the time you get into bad habits. And it's really important for newbies who are going to be getting into property or investing or deal sourcing, that they think about those things as well. And it sounds simple, it sounds really easy, but it is so easy to get out of those habits. And I've had to pay for people really to basically discipline me. So I've got a personal fitness trainer that I do 3 times a week, and it's just literally to get my mind in shape, because I wouldn't be able to work until 1-2 in the morning, some days, if I didn't have enough clarity in my head. And sometimes you think that you're going to be working less because you're taking time out to do these activities and walking, running, whatever you're doing. but actually it's giving your head space to clean it out, get rid of all of the toxins inside, and
True.
and give yourself that headspace. And honestly, the less I do, the more productive I become. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a sense that that 6 hours of me really being focused is better than me being 12 hours focused and actually kind of dipping in and out of consciousness because you've not got your head in the right shape.
That's so true. Like I said, I started property about a year ago, July the 1st to be exact, so it's coming up to pretty much a year. But one of the things that I noticed was, obviously I'm working from home, and you get into bad habits in terms of bad eating habits. You get into, obviously you can't see, but the keg's covered. You get into bad eating habits, you get into working habits which are actually unhealthy. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of guys online that will, like your Gary Vaynerchuks, that will say work 18-hour days, 20-hour days, and sacrifice your sleep, and that's cool. You can do that for a certain amount of time before it starts to catch up with you. And like I said, you don't take time out to exercise, to eat correct, and if anything, that ends up actually accumulating, and actually, instead of taking time away, like you said, from what you would assume you're taking time away from your work to go out and exercise for an hour, it actually does you a lot of benefit. You tend to feel fresher when you wake up in the morning. You tend to sleep better. So I agree with you totally. What does your morning routine look like then? If are you do you have one, or is it just a case of wake up straight like Terminator, straight into like work mode? You wake up in that blaze, or?
Well, during obviously this situation that we're in now, I've actually been woken up by birds most days. So before I used to have an alarm clock, but now I'm waking up at 7:30 with the birds sort of tweeting outside. Obviously I can have my window open, so it's and I live in a dorm, chalet bungalow, so it's a dormer, so I'm living in the top part of that, and I'm just getting woken up naturally. And obviously I check my sort of amount of sleep I have. I have 6 hours 7 minutes sleep a day on average across the year, which for most people probably isn't enough. For me, that's more than enough. I kind of feel pretty energized after that. So there's a kind of a sweet spot that I have. In terms of my morning routine, it's getting better. I mean, I do, like I said, I've got training sessions 3 times a week on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, which start at 9 o'clock, finish at 10 o'clock. And we're doing sort of circuit training stuff and different exercises. And before that, I'll have a banana and a protein shake. Sometimes a croissant or something like that when I'm not feeling right for healthy food. But that would be kind of the morning routine. And then after that, I feel kind of I'll have a shower and then get ready for work. In terms of after that exercise and putting my mind into a working mode, I've cleaned my head of everything, and I've had ideas for the morning, and actually start to remember things that I need to do for the day. And I'll have a plan of what I need to do for the day. I'll list that out, and I've got a system where I kind of prioritize the certain tasks. That list obviously is massive at the moment, but with the addition of 1 or 2 people, I'm going to have a virtual assistant that will help me kind of bring down a lot of my personal tasks as well, booking tickets, filling out forms and things like that. So my morning looks a bit like that, and then I come home, and I'm working from my home at the moment, but we're hopefully going to have an office, I'm hoping by the end of the year.
Wow.
Obviously things have been slowed down because of the current situation, but the office is more going to be for a kind of just a sort of a flag in the ground as a statement of this is what we've achieved so far, and we can afford to have kind of an office.
It's a milestone.
It's not necessarily something which is 100% necessary. We could all work from home, but it's more about building a team spirit, getting people together and building a kind of a corporate environment and making it feel like a business rather than a lifestyle kind of hobby type thing.
Yeah. So one thing that I wanted to ask you, obviously I've noticed you've started to get quite active now on social media. Your LinkedIn posts are trending like literally every other week. Like it's crazy. Yeah, your Instagram's popping off. We did a little live on Insta actually, which was epic. How do you feel like that's affected your business? Has it affected it in a positive way? What's your sort of goal with social media, and what made you sort of take a real push on it? Because you've even employed someone to help you with that now as well, just to sort of get your name and brand out there. How is that working out, and what's sort of the goal with it?
Well, funny enough, I made a post recently about how I hate social media. And to be honest, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because you have to be active on social media all the time. But at the same time, I'm not a massive fan of trying to promote something or trying to kind of fish for things. It's more of a case of, I'd rather share experiences and stories, and if they capture people's imagination and minds and they want to talk to me, great. I don't necessarily want to sort of, push a product in someone's face. I guess from our perspective, we are looking to target a certain type of investor. The way that we wanted to approach it was not by advertising, but by showing how we're doing things to demonstrate that we are credible people, and we are people that they would want to work with. I think that's the kind of the moral of the story. And the reason why we've employed someone is purely because we don't have enough time to be posting all the time and controlling the replies and everything. And it doesn't mean to say that we don't get involved. We do, but it's and obviously a lot of the content we do provide. So, for example, on LinkedIn, I write also a voice memo, 6 or 7 ideas a week to our social media manager person. And then she kind of paraphrases it and kind of condenses it into a way which then becomes easier for me to then proofread it. So that's how we've done that. And to be honest, it's been quite successful, just because the ideas are just coming to me quite quickly, and also they're fairly short, sharp and sweet, but there's always a kind of a moral to the story of all of these things, whether it be bad experiences, good experiences. So Hannah was doing probably a lot more social media than I was, and it became apparent that we need to sort of both be doing more, kind of me more proactive. So we employed someone to help just promote the company and take it away from being the Hannah and Gwyn show to becoming Bespoke as a brand. So you don't know who the Coca-Cola director is, the general director. You don't know who the Nike general manager is, right? So the same as Bespoke, we wanted to get to a stage where the brand would speak for itself, like the Property Newbies group. Although everybody knows Gulf. But it's the brand itself, and people will be drawn to the brand because they've seen it, they've heard about it, and people have been talking about it.
It's funny that you say that, because I love social media, I love branding. I'm no expert in it, but I remember something.
Come on,
I'm not. I remember Gary Vee saying something which was really interesting, actually, because he said, and it's what you kind of touched on there. He said, when it comes to personal branding, he goes, 20-30% of people will just not like you because it's you. They might not like your hair, they might not like your face, they just won't like you. But this is why eventually you want to transcend from a personal brand to a logo, because you can't have hate for a logo unless you've had a bad experience with it, rather than having hate for a person or dislike for a person. Hate's a strong word. So that's fairly good. What I wanted to ask you though is, a lot of my posts I write myself. How are you finding it, having sort of another party translate your ideas, then pass back to you just to double check, and then post online? Does it work quite well, or is there always that little bit that's lost?
Well, it's obviously in its infancy. I can't say that we've been doing it for months and months. That's not true. But essentially, most of the content, because the person isn't experienced in property, they don't necessarily understand what an R2SA is or a BRR. So we're having to educate them from that perspective. But on the other hand, most of the content is coming from us anyway. So I will, like I said, record it on a voice memo, and then it's more of a case of just packaging it up and keeping the sense of what I'm saying. So if I'm talking about a story, there's a beginning, middle and an end, and it has to fit within the parameters of what social media platform it is. In terms of Instagram and Facebook, obviously, there's a bit more kind of freedom for that. With LinkedIn, it has to be a bit more business oriented and content driven. With Facebook and Instagram, there can be a bit more flexibility with it. You can play around with the designs and how you talk to people more than you would do on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's more kind of my thing, because it's a more business platform, sort of B2B type of thing, where people are talking on one level, in one language, one type of dialogue, and there's no real kind of banter and hammering of people. It's not as personal. It's more kind of on a certain level, which I'm used to. I don't like to sort of get involved in petty discussions and things. So that's how I found it. And obviously, with the person on board now, we may be bringing a second person on as well to potentially create a community group, but maybe for Russians and in Russian language.
I like that.
Nothing's really been done on that sense, and maybe longer term it'll be quite an interesting avenue. We did think actually of a LGBT type of angle. just to sort of be a bit more unique, and even kind of create a niche, because there are deal sourcers out there.
Yeah.
There are sort of certain things which you can see out there, but those different topics could be a bit more relevant to myself and Hannah.
Yeah.
So that was the idea.
Love it. Last question from me, which is for any newbies that are wanting to start out in deal sourcing, because we're getting a lot of people join the group now that are completely new, wanting to do it as a strategy, maybe even as a full-time job moving forward. What advice would you give them starting out? And I know that's quite a broad subject, but is there sort of like, say, like 1 or 2 points that you'd say just focus on this, and then maybe you can work on the others as you progress?
I always think that when you get into a new job, you've got a boss or a manager that handholds you and shows you the ropes. And there's 2 or 3 ways you can do that. You can either pay someone to train you and educate you, who then doesn't manage you and look after you after that. That's one way of doing it. The second way is to partner with someone and say, look, can I work for you? I'm happy to work for free for a few weeks or a month. And, if anything works out, then great. Or there's probably another way of doing it as well. So maybe online courses and sort of learning that way. But I'd say I personally am a practical person. Theory is great, but you need to see with your own eyes how it's done, how this table is made, how this microphone is made. Show me how it's done. And then I'll be able to repeat it. And I think that's the main thing. You can choose the strategy, buy, refurbish, refinance, service accommodation, land deals, but until somebody's shown you kind of the pieces, how it all goes together. So how do you find an investor? How do you find a deal? How do you package it? How do you do your assessment? All of those things will be completely different company to company. They have obviously certain criteria for each type of deal, but until somebody sits down with you and shows you how it's done, whether that's an online platform or a physical person doing it, it's really going to be difficult, and you'll always have questions of how does that work? Because you haven't gone through it 2 or 3 or 4 times to be able to then confidently tell somebody else how it's done. So when you go into any business, you will get trained first, and the person training you will say, right, tell me how you're going to do it. And they say, well, first of all, you take this, you do this, and you go there. Say, right, okay, brilliant. Now teach somebody else how to do it.
Yeah, it's totally different.
So it's train the trainer. So those principles are in the corporate world, and it should be the same for deal sourcing. I should be able to teach you how to do it, and then you should be able to teach the next person how to do it. So it's kind of like this, this rippling effect. And I would honestly advise a newbie, obviously, to educate themselves with online stuff and get as much free content as they want, but you can try and do it on your own if you want to from scratch, and that's not a bad thing. You can partner with somebody else, so somebody's finding the investors while you're finding the deals, so that you're kind of helping each other, or partner with a company or somebody who you think could be credible and say, look, do you want to go 50-50 on this, or do you want to help each other? And then you'll get more practical experience, and that's the main thing that's going to be key. Yes, you can do all the theory, you can read through books, you'll get all the compliance and things. None of
it makes sense when you get an agent shut you down, when you're checking through contracts and leases and all of that stuff. That's you can read about it, but it's only until you get an email or a phone call which says otherwise that you're really going through it.
And every day with even we're learning new things every day. So you'll get bigger deals, you'll get different types of deals and things that, foreign investors that don't have guarantors, how do you deal with that? They don't have a salary in pounds. What do? Do you throw the deal away, or can you find a solution? So there's always these little small tricks and tips that you can learn through going through the process, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times.
I think that's quite, you touched on an amazing point there, to be honest with you. I think your network when you're starting out and the people that you're surrounded by, you don't realize how much they could help you potentially moving forward, because they've got pieces of knowledge which you may not know. They've got access to stuff which you may not have, and the vice versa might be true. It's just a case of piecing both of those 2 together. That's amazing, man.
The other thing as well is that I'm quite an inquisitive person. So working in Russia and in a role in procurement, people were selling to me every day, coming into me, presenting to me, and I'd literally have questions of, tell me about the product, where's it made from, what's the thickness, tell me the parameters, where who's your suppliers, tell me your best clients, all of those questions. In my mind, I'm like an interrogator. And I'm not saying that we want to work with investors that are interrogators as well, but deal sourcers should, if they're trying to learn, ask as many questions as they can to acquire that information and knowledge, and don't just suck it up. Ask if you don't understand it. Ask why. Why does that happen? What if we're talking about guarantors, why do you need a guarantor? Could it be a UK-based person? Is it a foreign person? Okay, all those questions which could or may not be relevant. There's no stupid question, and so you want people to be as open, honest, and be as inquisitive as they can.
Yeah, pretty much the take home from today, and it really just be honest, be inquisitive, and just keep grafting along, man. Gwyn, thank you very much. How can people get in touch with you? You've got an Instagram, you've got a LinkedIn.
I honestly prefer probably Facebook. On Facebook, so Gwyn Thomas on Facebook, you can find me, and obviously in the Newbies group.
Yeah.
Or maybe we'll drop it in the comments or something.
All links for everything will be in the description. Brilliant. And just to let anyone know, if you're catching this, you'll be doing a live sort of demo on the rent-to-rent calculator, how to use it, how to analyze the numbers, and obviously with anything that we do live, we just get a ton of questions which you'll answer. So a lot of free content that Mr. Gwyn Thomas gives out. So thank you very much for coming on.
It's been a real
thank
pleasure.
You very much for sharing everything that you know, and can't wait to see where everything goes with you.
Just want to make a comment and say that your hat and your hair is looking really good.
No, it's not. Mate,
it's been a pleasure. I'm real honoured to be on your show, and do you know what? If for all of the people watching this show is going to go far. So congrats on getting that done.
Thank you very much.
Really good to see you.
Right, peace out.
See you guys.
Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did like the video, please be sure to hit that like button, and please be sure to subscribe and turn on those bell notifications for more videos like this. And if you're interested in property investing and you're just getting started and you want to be surrounded by like-minded individuals, then feel free to join our Property Newbie Facebook group, whereby you'll have access to a ton of free resources as well as regular live feeds to help aid your property journey. Also, be sure to follow me on Instagram, where you'll see small exclusive snippets of the YouTube videos before they come out, as well as behind the scenes of shooting the podcast. But until then, have an absolutely amazing day. Until next time, peace out.